Muito boa tarde.
Good afternoon, everyone. Did you all have a nice lunch? Take a deep breath so that anyone will fall asleep. This theme is very important, and we must increasingly listen and dialogue about this theme because information is the best form of prevention. So today, in this new panel in the afternoon, we'll talk about suicide. I'd like to call to the stage the moderator of this panel and all the panelists who will shine in this moment with their knowledge. A professional with 40 years of experience. He coordinates the movement Caminhada de Restauração, called CER, based on the 12 steps since 2001. He worked as a consultant in Pacto pela Vida and was part of CIPOD and also the Compod of Fortaleza. He gives lecture in churches, schools, and companies about chemical dependency. He has a post-graduation in chemical dependency. He holds a specialization in teamwork, and he has a BA in physical education. My dearest Nelson Massambani. And I believe there's a gift as well. Welcome, Nelson. Now I'd like to call he who is a clinical psychologist, specialized in neuropsychology. He works in the clinical field with cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as with neuropsychological and neuropsychological rehab. He's an expert in bipolar disorder. He also evaluates and treats all other disorders. Professor Carlos Costa. Welcome. She is a clinical psychologist specialized in grief, separation, and losses. She also is specialized in suicide. She has a post PhD in philosophy of education and PhD in clinical psychology from PUC São Paulo. She works in suicide prevention, air, air accidents, and emergencies. She worked in the most well-known tragedies taking place in Brazil, such as Boate Kiss and others. She is a CRN Menac facilitator, professor, and human rights consultant. She is part of emergency commissions and APAV and coordinates actions of human actors in aviation. Dr. Rosana Borer. I'm sorry. Rosana Borer. Thank you very much for being here. Now, him who has an MA and PhD from the University of Brasilia, BA in odontology, and he's a technologist in gastronomy. He's clinical psychologist and professor of the University Center ESB. He is a supervisor in behavioral cognitive therapy. He develops research and aimed at the behavioral psychology. He has a specialization in anxiety, serotonin, behavioral cognitive therapy. Professor Dr. Gilson Pinheiro, please. As he comes to stage, I will call my friend Nelson and I'll hand the microphone over to him. The time is over there. Hi, Gilson. Take a seat by Carlos so that he won't feel alone, right? Good afternoon. It was said that I could walk back and forth, and I was so happy because I don't know if you have the opportunity to talk to people and talk to people. And if I stay just standing here without walking, it will be very complicated. So I'm from Italian descent, so I talk with my hands, and now one of my hands is holding the microphone, and I think it's to stay on time. I only would like to talk to you quickly about this panel. So there are only 4 slides that I have to present. So boys, please put them up. This is the first one. We need to talk about suicide. Marcelo has just said we must address mental health as a taboo-free and a serious topic. Mental health must be part of our everyday table. We cannot think and we must not talk about mental health in our table, on our table. Why do I say that? Because, unfortunately, many of those topics that used to be taboos, and later I'll talk about my life a little bit. Talking about drugs 45 years ago was something so weird, and we did not have the habit of talking about it. And today we live in an epidemic and this of chemical dependency. So we must talk about all topics. Next slide. This is the theme, and shortly my friends will address that. My niece, happy and full of life, she attempted suicide. What now? What now? All suicide attempt must be treated with seriously because each and every life is valuable. We can move on. Some data I'd like to read with you. This material will be later available. 700,000 suicides per year. These data are from the World Health Organization, data from 2021. Interesting to say that these things happened in a year where things were very weird still. We are survivors. I don't know you guys, but I almost died during the COVID pandemic. I lost dear friends, so we didn't understand much, and we didn't know even the consequences of that. And now we live today this crazy wave of mental illnesses that whose cause, I'm sure, has a lot to do with that, with the COVID pandemic. The cause of 1 at each 100 deaths, suicide, and it's a public health issue. I don't know if you know any public policy that addresses suicide. Throughout these years in Ceará, later I will talk a little bit about my history. I've been actively participating in some fights. Orange May is one of them, but Yellow September is too close to us. It used to be only Pink October, then Blue November, and now we have the month of the mental illness, which is January. So it's a public health issue. Take a look at the age group of those guys. Mostly 15 to 29. For each suicide, it's estimated that over 20 attempts of suicide are made. And the last slide, I think we even could just leave it there because we have repeating that so much and it's fundamental. So information is the first step. I am the son grandson and great-grandson of Italian people. My great-grandparents came from Italy because they were starving in Italy. And many of these families that came starved. There were topics in the family that we could not address, and one of them was suicide, because there was a history of suicide among my family, great granduncles. For instance, I was born and raised in a very small town in the countryside of Paraná. My father had a serious alcoholism problem, and my family was, on the one hand, a working family, and we made a lot of effort. It was, on the other side, very dysfunctional due to my father's alcoholism. And at a very early age, I started drinking and smoking. And soon after, when I was a pre-adolescent, I started using some psychoactive substances that started to change my way of being. When I was 17, I I went to a federal university to do agronomy. And when I was 29, I was committed to a psychiatric hospital due to a suicide attempt. My mother left Apucarana. She had never traveled before anywhere. Poor thing, she didn't even know how she got there. She just had to go to Luz station, get a bus, go to Juiz de Fora, and from Juiz de Fora she got to Viçosa and she found her son the way she dreamt of me. She dreamed of me one day in which I was like lying somewhere, a very dirty place, only wearing a swimsuit, and she was so desperate with all of that that she didn't even think twice. My parents were already separated, and my siblings were studying in a different and living in a different place. And my mother left and went to Viçosa, and she found me the way she had dreamt of me in one of her dreams. And she was desperate. She didn't know what to do with me. She decided to bring me back, and I was became an inpatient of a hospital in Londrina called Shangri-La. And I thank God for that hospital. I know all of those things about this psychiatric reform, but that hospital, my involuntary, being committed involuntarily there saved my life. I tried to go back to Viçosa. I went back to using drugs, and then I was using psychiatric medicines, psychiatric drugs, and then I was arrested. I had to do something to get money to support my addiction. And then another suicide attempt, and my mother was desperate. He was already committed in a hospital, he was already arrested. What am I going to do with this son of mine at home? She used to lock all the doors of the house. She didn't sleep. To sleep, she used to call my grandmother, and my grandmother slept by my side, but I didn't sleep. I didn't close my eyes. It was so weird. When I slept profoundly. No one was capable of waking me up. But very often, taking psychiatric medicine, I used to run away and then use drugs and drink, and then I used to come back home. My mother decided to do something that was very, very beautiful. I always tell her that. Because we talk about with family members who are codependent and do not want to know that he uses drug and etc. My mother, she almost put a big billboard in front of my house saying, I have a son who's a drug addict. Can someone help me, please? I don't know what to do. I don't have an idea of what to do. And then it was discovered that were therapeutic communities. Back then, in 1983, my mother called so many times and discovered that were five psychiatric, 5 therapeutic communities, and there were 4 near my town. And when my mother called them and explained my case, they said, Dona Maria, we are a house that helps recovery, addicts in recovery. Your son is crazy. He belongs to a mental institution. Doesn't he talk to spiders and everything? That's He can't stay here. If he gets here and commits suicide, what will he do? A therapeutic community, one of them said, bring your son here, let's see what happens. 380 kilometers from my house, Curitiba. My mother, we went there by bus. We did the interviews, talked to the pastor of the recovery house, and she left me there. In the first month she got there to visit me, we had visits once a month. She called the pastor and she told him, I will take my son back. And he said, no, he's suffering here. He said some weird things to me. And the pastor said, no, leave him there. Leave him here. We'll take care of him. Don't worry. I entered there on the 28th of January, 1984. Then in February, my mother went again. In March, my mother visited me again. When she got back there to visit me in March, she was desperate. They had shaved my head, my entire head. You know why? Because I was eating my hair. The house leadership decision was to let's leave him bald because he will eat his hair. When my mom saw me, it was like just like Kojak. I have a friend who was a barber and he always cuts my hair like that. And he said, I'll take my son home. He's suffering too much here. Did you give him medicine? They said, Dona Maria, we have been doing the medicine you leave at the office, but sometimes it has no effect. We were so ignorant back then that depending on the therapeutic community, psychologists, psychiatrists was a weird thing. No, 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 no psychologist, no psychiatrist. If it were an evangelical home like the one I went to, depending on the line, they would say Jesus is the doctor of doctors. And I faced that. Then the pastor told my mom, Dona Maria, how used to be your life before you bringing Nelson here? Oh no, I had no peace, I couldn't sleep, etc. So, let's make a deal. Just leave him here until the last deadline we'll give you, which is 90 days, the last Sunday of April. And then if you come back and want to take him home, I'll let you take him. Up until then, please let him stay here. But the pastor told her, I would like to ask you something. Get a piece of paper, write your son's name, tell why he's here, where he is, and ask people to pray for him. Whenever you find a circle of prayer in every church, deliver this piece of paper and says, pray for my son. He's kind of crazy. He's been using drugs. He's saying disconnected things. He has tried to commit suicide. Please. I would open in parentheses here to say the following. Years went by. A pastor friend of mine called me to go to Rondônia, to the city of Porto Velho. And I preached Friday, Sunday, and then he took me to a river stream and he told me, Nelson, there you have drugs there already. The things are really terrible. People are dying. Talk about your life. Tell them what God did in your life. Okay. Then Daniel introduced me. I opened the Bible and started talking. But when I started talking, a lady interrupted me and said, Pastor Daniel, and everybody looked at him, looked back and said, What's the name of your friend? This one you brought? Nelson Roberto, and she started crying. My son, your name is in my Bible. I pray for you until today. Who gave me that request of prayer was a lady called Nereide from a church, Presbyterian Church of Arapongas. It's the city of my grandmother. God took care of me. My brother went back to the therapeutic community the next month, and to her surprise, what was the surprise? Before she met me, everybody was talking about soccer and Nelson was talking about pumpkin. No one knew why. But in that month of April, something happened. On 4th of April, 1984, 4th of April of 1984, on that day, God filled my life with joy, with purpose, and I understood I had a mission in my life and that I was going to do that until my last days. I was going to talk about the love of God. I was going to help people who suffered like my family and me myself. And I've been doing that for over 40 years. And God is so great that I was talking to my colleagues who will soon talk to you. God me gave a gift when I came here. It was to talk to a lady. I don't know if she was talking with me at a suicide table. After this, we will sit on a table to talk to you, talk about your questions, so feel at ease to do so. That's why I came to this panel. When Giselle called me, she said, Pastor, but please bless us with your story. Tell people who we are, what you do. So I will introduce myself as I introduce myself in Fortaleza. Who recalls the film Finding Nemo? There was a huge shark, right? When they were going to present the sharks that ate fish, he presented itself like, Hi, my name is Bruce. And all the tiny fish said, What? Hi, Bruce. So let's see if you catch the message. Good good evening, good afternoon, family. My name is Nelson. I am a beloved disciple of my older brother. His name is Jesus. And even having a God creator as my father, even though I'm sure that the person of the Holy Spirit, who is also God, inhabits me, I continue to live that incongruence of Romans 8. Miserable or not, what I want to do, I do not want to do, I do. And what I do not want to do, I do it again. Yes, I do. I don't fight only with the chemical dependency of drugs. I've been abstinent. Today's the 18th for 11 days and 37 years. But most importantly is that I did not use drugs today. And I fight against pornography. I fight against the craving to get, the wish to will to get things that are not mine, with lying, with a tiny thing called procrastination, food compulsion, eating compulsion. And I have been struggling for over 20 years with depression. Depression doesn't leave me, doesn't get off my feet. Oh my, 2 years and a half fighting, struggling against depression. I was sharing with a colleague and I said, it's interesting that in this depression that I had 20 years ago and I struggle with it until today, I didn't have any, I didn't want to commit suicide. But how often in the back, lying on my hammock without wanting to talk to anyone, thinking, oh my God, what's going to happen? And I used to say, God, wouldn't it be better if I didn't wake up tomorrow? Do as you wish in my life. If that's it, everything is okay. That was for many times that was my prayer. We need to talk about suicide. Please. We must talk about suicide. Amen. I'll be back at the end because I'd like you to leave you very much at ease with that beautiful lady who came from São Paulo. Young lady is great, amazing. It made my day. Good afternoon, everyone. After such a testimony, a strong testimony, so beautiful words, so moving words, it's difficult to start. Thank you very much for such a strong and blessed testimony. I hope this faith remains among us and that we keep together. Thank you very much. I'd like to appreciate for this invite. Thank you for all of you who are here, my colleagues who also came, and my dear husband who's here today as well. The pastor has already said, when we talk about rates, we'll start with that very quickly. He said that the current rate that even mostly was reduced in most part of the world, but which is still very high, we do not have the same joy in the Americas. In the Americas, including Brazil, the suicide rate has increased. And in the case of young people, aged from 14 to 29, is the fourth cause of death among young people. So we have 400,000 people that die every year. So it is a war. The last World War took 4 years. Let's imagine how many deaths we have and how many deaths times four. And the war here is again pain and suffering. And as Pastor Nelson said, things became worse after the pandemic as we see its effects even today. When we die, we deal with grief all the time, but death by suicide is one of the most difficult griefs to deal with. There's accident, a disaster, which is unexpected and violent, but the suicide, it has that thing that we say that's undescribable, we cannot express because it affects friends, school, community, the family, families. carry a stigma because when you say, oh, you have a child or a brother, a sibling, a father, that person died by suicide, you say, yes, that person passed away, but so young. What happened? And the family cannot say because the first thing that the world judges is, wow, suicide. Then they start, people start to presume things. Why? Maybe the family did not take good care of them. Did they, that the person had a problem and no one noticed? So a pain comes, and we deal with what his mother dealt, powerlessness in view of the suffering of the other. Because you love that person, but your love is not enough to keep that person alive, and that's very painful. So I said here it's the fourth death cause of death among young people, and we will talk specifically about young people, but the symptoms, when I talk about the symptoms or actions, please understand that young people of any age, because this pain, when it catches us, it doesn't matter the age. I can have my age. I will not say what my age is. But at that time, if I felt the pain of the will of no longer exist and pray to God saying, if you want, I don't need to be here tomorrow. I no longer have the age that I have. Maybe I'm so small and so fragile that I might feel like a child. So, when I bring to you the facts, think about any teenager of adolescent of any age, even 60, 70 years old. So quickly, talking about young people, why young people enter this existential despair to the point of no longer wanting to live. First of all, they live in affectional disorder, which is natural. Like a child forms itself, our intellect is also under development. But among young people, when they start to reach that age in which they think they must be independent, they feel certain griefs. Which are the what's the grief? The grief of the child's body, but he doesn't have an adult's body. The grief of his identity. He can no longer be the little mama's boy or mama's girl because he must needs to be something. But who am I? Who do I want to be? Which are my values? Am I strong? Do I have self-esteem? I compare myself with others all the time. So he undergoes grief. He needs to let go of the dependency of their parents, that warming place. No, he needs to cry alone. So they start to feel grief and they will to ask for help because that's mental health. But they think they can't ask for help because he does not want to feel frail, so fragile. So then the problem starts. They don't have enough resources developed. That resource, for instance, when you end a relationship, when you are an adult, emotionally adult, you say, wow, that's so difficult. I'm suffering. I didn't want that. I felt so rejected, betrayed, whatever. You cry. You stay in bed during 4 days and say, I don't want to see anyone, forget about me, I'll stay here alone. But then you stand up and say, okay, I have things to do, I have my bills to pay. And then with that pain, you wake up. Young people think that pain will never go away because he doesn't have emotional resources enough. So they have a low resilience still. Social life, they need to have a sense of belonging. They want to belong to groups. They want to be popular and loved and admired. They want to feel important. And very often he's rejected within his group or suffers bullying. The case I will tell you quickly. Why did they change? You know, when you change the years and people have take different grades and they change friends, change classrooms, and there's the sports dispute, and that person who used to belong to my class, they go to a different class. So then friends start to practice bullying. So a pressure starts, a peer pressure starts. So the sense of belonging that we need so much, I don't feel welcome for some reason, due to comparison or dispute, or because I just changed classes, or because schools it's too demanding, and then there are the divisions, and I start feeling frail, fragmented. I need to have social media. I must know how to deal with social media. I know everything about it because if I know less, I will lag behind. I need to meet all the hedonistic demands of the current world. What's hedonism? It's focus on pleasure. Who here has heard a young person say, "Oh, living is suffering and being happy"? But it's suffering as well. Which young person can handle a negative feedback? So you say, "Oh, I'm going to give a feedback." And then I'm a teacher, and then I tell the young person, "Your work is not good. Can you redo it?" And that young person with 170, he says, "No, I'm not good." No, it's not you that's not good. Only this work is not very good. But no, that person falls apart. She thinks that person, they think as a whole are not good enough. So they have little resilience, little resistance. They have a thin skin, so you cannot hit hard. You have to be very careful. And they don't know their own purposes. In addition, they do not have emotional management. So emotional peaks are like that. Everything is amazing and perfect, or things are horrible. There's no balance, there's no in between, but emotional peaks, they don't know how to manage emotions well. So that person has to address the entire novelty of the world outside, and they have no resources or not enough resources. So we have then dysfunctional families and etc. And something important start to happen. I'd like to highlight the word hopelessness. When a baby is born, how does he feel? He was in the mother's belly, very warm for 9 months, breathing. And then the child is born. The second he's born, he feels physical pain. His eyes hurt due to clarity because he was in the dark. He must breathe by himself. His lung hurt. He feels cold because it's no longer warm. And then he's kind of slapped to cry because he must show that he can breathe alone. Freud says that that moment, that first experience of ours of anguish, is an anguish that's the feeling that we're going to die immediately. And that anguish, we spend an entire life trying not to relive it. That's why we are anxious. People say, "Oh, it's bad to be anxious." No, anxiety is one of the most important emotional skills of human evolution. Not when it's a disorder, but when it is a concern. I will take an exam and I'm anxious. I will study. I preoccupy myself to do that. So anxiety is a characteristic of human evolution, but when it reaches a higher level, it goes beyond that protection of that first experience to get closer to it. So, if anything happens with me, for example, a young person that feels guilty or ashamed, how many young people kill themselves because they feel guilty or ashamed? So when something happens with you and you are ashamed and you have resources, you apologize, you will face the situation, you will fight, whatever it takes, you will do it. But if you don't have resources, you will say, I can't face the world. I'm so ashamed. What people will think about me? I'm a burden. I better die. So when we talk about that child prototype, that contact of the first emotional pain that at first seemed physical, but it's not, that child felt like he was going to die. And when you, if you're 16, 15, then you nude pictures to your boyfriend, and then someone spread them, and you think you can no longer survive that moment, what will you do? You are no longer anxious. That common anxious anxiety that makes you move yourself to solve your problems. You feel that primary anguish, the most primitive anguish that's death is about to happen. So instead of getting in touch with preventive anxiety, you'll get in touch with that imminence of death, and think has you will think things there's no way out. So that's abandonment. And that feeling that I cannot count with anyone. Nothing for me will have a solution. There's no future for me. And that abandonment is overwhelming. And I can't ask for help. And I don't see that anyone can help me. So how can someone help me if my nude pictures are already out there? I have no way out. So from abandonment, I can get into despair and lack of hope. If I enter into these feelings and someone remove these feelings from me, like Nelson's mother did, at that moment, friends, family members, they feel powerless. Everybody suffers. Everybody enters the same process of abandonment. But that person who's the focus, he might seek uh, a solution that's drastic, which is the suicide attempt. And that person may, here we have the risk levels. That person can start thinking, I want to die. Oh my God, I want to die. I wish I would die. When things are not that severe. But when you start to make plans, or even regarding the testimony, have more than one attempt, that shows how severe and close is the possibility of another attempt. And when we show that you should move away the means, one of the cases I saw, the kid used the tennis, his shoelaces, and he died because of that. So he hung himself with his shoelaces. So how young people seek solutions? Oh, they listen to music, they get upset, they cry, talk, spend 3 hours on the phone with their friends. Religion, it's very important. Friendships, family, sports. One of the therapeutical techniques is writing, but they are competent strategies. When we start, so this is virtual world, they start seeking for help. There are a lot online that can help people, and we have seen as well that we have many things that are terrible. They may start developing compulsions, addiction, drugs. When I do not find food, drink, games, drugs, they start looking for something else. Why? Because he's desperate. He has no hope. And if they have a depression, things get even worse. So it can cause self-harm or even actually commit suicide. So these are the strategies that are used. Some of them are very competent, some are not. What should you do to end this cycle is to prevent the more difficult strategies, less competent strategies are used. And how am I going to do that? We're going to talk about the environment. So very quickly, I take care of 4 cases, mostly adults, but I have 4 cases of young people just after adolescence, not much because adolescence goes until 24. And what did I see? Family. When it's about separation, a lot of conflict. Because you can separate, no problem. But how you will integrate and include your children in that situation, the feeling of abandonment, because many parents, when they fight with their partner, those who have separated know how it's difficult it is, and sometimes people use their children against the other to be able to feel correct and feel the right side in the separation. So they speak bad things about each other, and then that conflict starts, and the children are in the middle. So a lack of structure began. Now I have 2 homes. I have to spend 15 days with one, with my dad and with my mom. It's not only that, having 2 homes. I cannot invite my father to my birthday. Now I have to do 2 birthdays, and so on and so forth. Until the point that I said that they try to push one against the other. So negligent schools, or schools that to be able to have you, they have a ranking of approval at USP or in other universities that are difficult to get in, they start to require from students in a way, so they're so hard, they're so strict, they're too demanding, and they start saying like, oh, you are all, I will try to measure my words here because I'm online, right? You are too stupid. You do not do what it takes. You only like to go out, so go out and dance and go be no one in life. There are schools who treat their students like that. Do you think that's good? Do you think that's how should we do? Of course, we cannot be permissive. We have to set limits. But how do I give limits to someone? I set limits. These cases I have been seeing in my practice, there's a lot of bullying among peers, friends that go to each other's houses. And sometimes during treatment, I ask, what is your concept of friendship? Is this being a true friend? Do you need this type of friends? And on Instagram, I received the following: trend, best friend, boyfriend, girlfriend, and family. They all have end, not family. Sometimes some friendships must end because they're toxic. But young people think, if I lose that person, that friendship, how am I going to live? So all issues we are presenting here show that the problem does not seem that big, but the problem is not having the correct resource, but the impact of the accident is not the event itself, but the vulnerability I have regarding being prepared to address that. It's okay if I lose a friend if I don't think that's the end of the world. So vulnerability, the preparation I have to address that situation. So that's what's at stake here. So we must create structured environments, structure communities, churches, schools, families, even our practice, even the work group created where you work, where you go to, environment that offers solid bounds. Solid means I care what happens to you, not only with you, but what happens to you. So imagine a family environment, the ideal family environment. Let's create an utopia here. So you find support, guidance, sense of belonging. I belong to that school. I'm part of that school. I'm part of this family. I'm someone's sister. I must feel as I belong. This space teaches me ethics and respect. A space that does not teach me ethics, I don't know, I can't tell what's right from wrong. Everything is fine. everything is okay. It's important to be happy. This is hedonicism. It's a hedonistic culture. The person gets confused. We must give clear things for young people. I'm not talking about morality, I'm talking about discernment, presence, and emotional support. And presence is not time and you see, just not time on the cell phone. Leave your cell phone aside. Look the person in the eye. Ask how was your day. Ask how was your test. Was it difficult? Be careful with the level of demand because in some ages it's more important to overcome conflicts than go to the other grade, then do well in tests. Coherent parenting models. As I was saying, learning about ethics. When you learn that more than having a chain in your around your neck or beautiful clothes is to have dignity, honesty, and being respectful. When you understand that you are you because you have something inside you that's bigger than what they say outside, you're not afraid of saying no or disagree, or when someone points the finger at you and say, "Oh, you're different from us." Young people are afraid of being different. You have to be different. You have to express your opinion. One of the cases I was saying, there was a turmoil at the house because someone wanted to criticize a decision. And one of the patients said, "I don't want to do that. I don't want to be part of this group," and question the director. Well, that was enough for people to treat her badly, exclude her, and bully her. And I told her, continue, continue to do what you believe in. Because if you believe that you should not get yourself into this situation, don't do it. So, young people must be firm in their purposes. We have much to say, and I have to take care of time. And I want to focus on something that me as a psychologist, as I miss in the everyday life of school education, family education, community education, and etc. No one teaches virtues to people anymore. What makes us firm is to know who we are, not looking at the mirror and say, "Oh, you're beautiful, you're amazing, you're empowered." No, that's not what I'm saying. Because in the end, I know that I'm not. What do I have to do to be strong? You know what's to be strong is to have will to do, to stand up and study for my test. Does anyone wants to stand up and study for your test? Be truthful. Of course not. Did you want to come to Congress? Of course. We think it's good, but you felt like staying in bed. And then you are criticized. My time is up. So when you're criticized, and then mother, father, sibling, they say you have no willpower. You know what are the virtue of strengthness is not having willpower and will. The virtue of strengthness is to have the will to do good all the time. Because when you have that will to do good all the time, you stand up. You stand up to do your exam because you know the school is expensive and it will do you good and will do good for those who pay. When a mother is tired and stands up and gets up to give their child medicine against fever, no one wants to do that. But she knows she will do good. But for her, due to the will to do good, that's why she gets up and does it. We are inclined to be accommodated, you know. So we don't want to wake up early in the morning in the cold weather. But if I stand up, it will be good. I will do good. I will conclude something. And to wrap up, be careful because courage we do have. Courage is one of the virtues. Being fair with the other is doing things well done for you and others. I must grow and bring people with me. That's justice. When a young person learns to be fair in his relationships, they learn how to take a step behind for others and let others grow. They give space for others to grow, give room. So young people need patience, use less games and food and drinking. Young people are not prudent. That's what Cortella says. I can, but I want, but I should. So when we learn these two things, we do not become frail. Now I'd like to end with Lenini. I'm sorry for overdoing my time. Even when life requests more soul, calm down. The important is don't put an end to your life. Everybody has family members with whom we worry about, if not among friends, if not among family, among our friends. Suicide is irreversible. If we can give a semicolon instead of a period, every time we see testimonies of people that survived suicide attempts, they always said, if I knew that was like that, I wouldn't have attempted, you know. So things are different now. There are many cases online, and their testimonies show that. They say, I'm grateful that I survived because I had other ways to deal with that. That's it. Thank you.
Costa. Woo!
My dear Carlos Costa, please. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the organizers of Freemind. It's an honor to be here with such qualified professionals such as Rosanna. Rosanna I've just met. And it's an honor to be here in this panel hearing such valuable and reflexive testimony for all of us. Well, today we're going to talk about bipolar disorder. And I'm going to talk about myself and a bit about well, I'm going to quickly talk about myself, about what I do with what I work, and then we'll enter the theme. I'm a clinical psychologist specialized in neuropsychology and behavioral cognitive therapy. I work with these two areas within clinical psychology. I'm a member of the board of ATC. Professor Gilson is also part of the Association of Cognitive Therapies that we are creating here in Brasilia. I'd like to know, is anyone that works with cognitive therapy? Well, if you are if you practice that, please let's take a chat about the association because it's important that you all participate. We'll hold congresses and all types of events aimed at cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm a post-graduation professor and I work in the neurocognitive clinic here in Brasilia. For those who don't know behavioral cognitive therapy, I'll briefly talk about it. What is it about? It was created by Aaron Beck, who is this sir who has recently left us, unfortunately. And last week I was in an event by Judith Beck, his daughter. It was not her event, but she was one of the speakers of that event. And it is a directive psychological approach, differently from the most traditional and old lines that we know that are non directed. And it's focused on thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And psychoeducation is the main tool of behavioral cognitive therapy, at least in my opinion. And today, many people can look at me here and think, oh, Carlos is here as a speaker. No, I'm not here as a speaker. I'm here on a mission, which is psychoeducate. In cognitive behavior therapy, we have that mission of psychoeducate, of informing about the themes that are important for us to understand, not only about cognitive behavioral therapy, but about disorders, thinking, emotions, beliefs, any type of theme that is important to about which it's important to convey information. So today I'm on a mission of psychoeducating. In addition to psychoeducation, I myself, Carlos, have a mission of talking about bipolar disorder. Why? Because bipolar disorder is the disorder that society and professionals should know the most and is one of the disorders that people know the less. And they should know about it very much. First of all, let's deconstruct what is bipolarity. It's very common in our everyday lives to hear, oh, a bipolar person is that person that woke up with an idea, then at the end of the day, he slept with a different idea. That's what everybody thinks, but that's not bipolar disorder. It can happen to a bipolar patient, but that's not it. First of all, I'm sorry because I have some of allergies, so my throat is not very good. First of all, bipolar disorder is a humor disorder. Many know about depression, especially unipolar depression, but bipolar disorder is also a humor disorder, and it's considered by many, even by me, as being the most difficult disorder to address among all disorders of which we know about. And it's difficult to diagnose it. And that's the main challenge of bipolar disorder, is to be able to make a diagnosis of that disorder. So patient, it takes turns between hyperthermy, hypothermy. This is a very technical language, so I'll try to translate that to a more simple way. Euthemy would be balanced humor or neutral humor. I'm not euphoric, nor depressive, nor sad. I am balanced. Hypothermia is what we call depression, regardless of bipolar or unipolar. And hyperthemia is what differs the bipolar disorder from that depression we talk about on social media, on TV, on lectures, etc. Because hyperthemia, using a simple language, it's not exactly that, but it's the opposite of depression. If we're in the depression, I don't have energy, I don't have pleasure in what I do, I don't want to do things. In hyperthemia, this inverts. So we have over too much energy, and in addition, we may have the dysphoric issue of irritability, which in recent studies we have been seeing that that's the main symptom of the bipolar patient when it is in a mixed depression or in hyperthemia. Hypothemia. Bipolarity is divided into type 1 and type 2. Our focus here will be on type 1 bipolarity, and type 2 I will soon talk about it. And the bipolar patient is more sensitive to stress than to other situations, conditions. So we all face stress in traffic, when we argue with our boyfriend or friend, when we are working a lot. We all experience that. And the bipolar patient is more sensitive to stress. So we call that sensitization. So we have the spectrum. We have to understand that humor is a spectrum that goes from hypothemia to hyperthemia. Someone who does not have a humor disorder, that person will stay in euthymia. So when most people, when we wake up a bit sad and no, we don't want to do anything, that is still euthymia in most people, because we cannot say that make depression something commonplace. We cannot say that any lack of energy or sadness is considered a depression. Hypothemia is something that's exacerbated and pathologically high. So it's a deep sadness or a lack or a high lack of energy or a deep lack of energy. Hyperthemia is the opposite, between quotes, of depression. So our focus today is not to talk about hyperthemia, uh, because our theme is suicide and we will enter into it soon. So bipolarity is divided into type 1 and type 2. First of all, I'm going to talk about type 1 because it is easier to diagnose. The person has euthymia, depression, and what we call Frankmania, and I will give an example of what it is. The person can stay, for instance, some days without sleeping. You can think, well, that's insomnia, right? It's not insomnia, and I get tired. And the next day I don't have the same, I cannot perform my activities. In the case of the bipolar person, when they are in mania, they have energy to continue to do their activity, but he can also sleep little, much less than what most people need to sleep while he is in his mania period. This might be the main factor for us to investigate if the patient is in mania or not. But many behaviors that are analogous to compulsion, such as spending one's entire money gambling. I have a patient that he spent all his assets in gambling when he was in mania. It can also have we can eat compulsively, or the sexual issue may be exacerbated in this period. And that's what happened in bipolar disorder type 1. And many times that patient will have psychosis and will have hallucinations and go through a psychiatric hospital. Type 2 is much more difficult to diagnose. So let's imagine the following. You met a person who was in depression, and 1-2 months went by, and you met that person, and that person was smiling, had gone back to work, was happy, excited, talking about dreams and making plans. At first, you could imagine that the person is well. Okay, he got or she got better. In the case of the bipolar person, they can be in hypomania, which is a lighter mania level, and it's much harder to diagnose. So these are the two types of bipolarity we have. And the most challenging one is type 2. although type 1 is a bit more severe, quotes, the type 2 is much more difficult to diagnose, and it has an average of 18 years until the first symptoms to diagnosis. So imagine suffering during 18 years, and that suffering takes place due to lack of knowledge of what is bipolar disorder, both by the lay audience and by mental health professionals who still to get more training about this disorder. Well, we are in this Congress about addiction in general, right? And bipolarity of out of all disorders, bipolarity is one of those that have that we technically call of dual pathology. What is that? It's when a person has a disorder and as a comorbidity, the person has a sort of addiction. And that may include substances and alcohol or gambling, pornography, etc. And why that happens in bipolar disorder? That happens because bipolar disorder, among all the disorders, is the one that we have the most that craving effect. So I'm going to explain how our brain works a little bit. Our brain, my brain, your brain, everyone's brain, they are blackmailers. What do you mean? Well, let's imagine that we have a very hot day. I was coming here, I was suffering with the heat. Yesterday it rained, but today it's very, very hot. I don't like the heat. It disturbs me. I suffer. And what happens when I take a shower with very cold water? What's my reply? I feel pleasure, right? I will feel pleasure. I will feel relief, like, wow, what a nice shower. I was so hot. The same thing when I'm cold. If I put clothes on, I will feel heat. That's how our brain works. For me to feel pleasure, I must do something. For most people, our routine already brings enough pleasure for us to feel well-being. If it's hot, I take a cold shower. If it's cold, I warm myself. If I'm hungry, I eat. In our daily lives, in our own daily life acts, we already have that pleasure response. In some disorders, and mainly bipolar disorder, for us to have the same pleasure response, these routine actions are not enough, okay? So it will be necessary something more. And we know where this something more is. It's in alcohol, drugs, pornography, sexual issues. So this is something that's very important for us to understand about bipolar disorder, the craving effect, which is that effect in which I do something or I use a substance and that creates a craving. So in a free translation, craving is fissura in Portuguese. So that craving brings that need for me to repeat that behavior. So the person uses a substance and that has a dopamine response that's very high in our brain. And the brain, in the blackmailing mode, will ask for that again. Of course, I'm extrapolating here and using a playful language, a simple language to pedagogically for you to understand what I want to say. I believe it's the easiest way to understand it. In the case of bipolar disorders, we have the precipitators. Precipitators. I just said that in bipolar disorder we have depression, which is hypothemia, and we also have hyperthemia. Let's imagine a bipolar patient, and he is in euthymia, and neurochemically, both regarding glutamatus and dopamine. I cannot talk about everything, so I'll say things that are not on the slide. But the idea here is to make you interested in the topic and study about it more. So in the case of bipolarity, let's suppose that we have a patient who's in euthymia, his humor is balanced, and on the neurochemical issue, he will not enter in hyperthemia at the moment. It would take a long time for this to happen. But then he would precipitate, he will use, if he uses one of those here, he will precipitate a new hyperthemia episode. So these substances here, and we have here very complicated substances because here we have substances that are both cultural, such as alcohol. So alcohol is part of our culture, and substances that are increasingly normalized, such as marijuana, which is a drug that is we can basically consider of that's widely used, many people who use it. And we have drugs that people who go to the gym use, and we have religious substances that are related to religious practices. So it's very complicated because all of these, they are bad for the bipolar person. Well, saying that it's bad, it's kind of commonplace, but they can be fatal for bipolar people. So it's important to understand that the bipolar patient cannot use anything. But you can see that we have caffeine. Do you I mean that's the most common thing that's in our coffee that we drink? Not me because I don't like coffee, but most people do drink. Or energy drinks, which people are using a lot as well, and which is a very complex substance because many are using it as if were water. In your company, for those who work with companies with many people, you must see someone drinking energy drink to be able to produce. And all of that is bad for you, and it can be fatal for bipolar people. Which are the consequences of the abusive use of substances for the bipolar patient? That person will destabilize his humor. So if he was euthymic and well, it will become, he will start to be not well. He will worsen. But among all of what we consider as drugs, we also have medications, right? Medications are drugs. What's the name of the establishment we go to? Drogaria, drug store, right? So when you talk about bipolar disorder, we are talking about depression. For those who are not from the mental health area, what's the medication that we take when we are depressive, when we have depression? Did I hear antidepressants? Yes. Bipolar people do not take antidepressants. Actually, if a bipolar person uses an antidepressant, it will be using one of the worst substances he could use because the substances causes something called maniac turn. He's in depression, he takes an antidepressant, and he goes to the other pole, which is mania, to the other extreme, mania. So I think you are being able to understand how complex this is. Because a psychiatrist who's not that well prepared or not very attentive, being generous here, of course, he can be maybe tired or maybe did not do a good anamnesis. He can prescribe an antidepressant for someone who had signs of being bipolar. Because if we know that disorder, doing a good anamnesis, we are able to identify. Of course, the psychiatrist does a very quick anamnesis, differently from psychologists because we take a long time interviewing patients. But even though there are things we learn to be able to identify if the patient is bipolar or not. Bipolar depression. Now we are moving to the main topic of our panel, which is suicide. Most times, the bipolar person will think about suicide in his depressive period. Not always, but almost always. They will have the idea and the thinking aimed at suicide. And one thing that's very important, mainly for those who are mental health professionals, bipolar depression is not the same as unipolar depression. Many people say, oh, when a bipolar person is depressive, it's like the unipolar depression. No, it isn't, because very often that depression is mixed. And that's the craziest information about bipolar disorder. So, because let's imagine that that person is having thoughts about devaluation, because that's what happens in depression. They think they're stupid, ugly, incompetent, which is what we call devalue beliefs. And then that patient is feeling a bad person, less valued, of less value, I'm sorry. He wants to kill himself. He does not feel pleasure in anything he does, but he has a very, very high level of energy. Imagine that. An energy where he cannot stand still. He walks through on the house the entire day, around the house the entire day. That's what we see in the mixed depression episodes. So I hope that everything leaves this place knowing that unipolar and bipolar depressions are different. The four pillars of depression. Hypothemia, which is a pathologically lowered humor, and the anhedonia, difficulty to feel pleasure, and abandonment, the difficulty to imagine a better future, and hypobulia, difficulty to feel at ease. So sleep is one of the most important factors in bipolar disorder. If the patient does not sleep well, if he does not follow these main criteria, his humor will be destabilized. The triad of suicide is this one: ideas, suicidal ideas, planning, which is the step that comes later from the idea, and the attempt, which is the last stage in which that person will effectively attempt suicide. Here I have some data showing that bipolar disorder is the disorder with the higher rates of suicide among all disorders, including borderline disorder, because they are closer over there. They are very close to another, but bipolar disorder is still the first one. And now it's our theme. My time is over, so I will end talking briefly here, talking about bipolarity in adolescence. Bipolar disorder is the disorder that has most the generic inheritability. So if a family member has bipolar disorder, so it's higher than in every other disorder. So a person is born genetically marked to have bipolar disorder. And therefore, the chance of that person developing disorder throughout his or her life is very high. And in the case of bipolar disorder, the first semiological criteria to identify if a person that is in his 40s or 30s, if that person is bipolar or not, is if during his adolescence he had depression before puberty. So that's the main criteria criterion for us to investigate. Of course, not all of them will have that, but most of them will. So, for example, a preteen or a teen with depression at aged 10 or no, 11 or 12, the chance of him or her being bipolar is very high. So very quickly, pharmaceutical, which is lithium, antipsychotics, atypical, which is their humor moderators for the disorder. In bipolarity, we work with prevention because once they regulate their humor, there's nothing else to do unless psychopharmacological treatment. And that's what we do in our field, behavioral cognitive therapy. I can explain about that later, but my time is ending. So that's it, and I hope I brought interesting information about the bipolar disorder.
Boa tarde, pessoal.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Great. Thank you. I decided to, oops, how do I, one more, okay. I started preparing my slides, and so many things came to my head about what to present to you. Then I decided to talk about an very important issue that Professor Rosanna already made comments about it, and it's very important. It's about cyberbullying, and I am also addressing the use of technologies. It is a very important topic, and I believe that most of you in the audience, I think everyone has already dealt with patients or people or know people who have already thought about suicide, have attempted suicide, and many of them and teenagers, there is this interface with cyberbullying and use of new technologies of these social media. The social media has been playing a central role. So I started to observe what interesting things I can get from social media. And these are some of the issues I put. Suicide among teenagers increases very fast. Brazil has an attempt of suicide and self-harm among adolescents at each 10 minutes. So it's a very concerning topic. I believe that most of you here who went to talk to cater to patients were anguished when they had to talk to patients about that. And the prevalence is very high, both among children and teens and adults and elderly people, different age groups. So this topic has a huge importance. So when you talk about cyberbullying,
Bullying, there are some texts that talk about virtual bullying that are done through digital technologies. So basically, all of us use social networks here, right? All of us. Adolescents use it, children use it, the elderly, everyone. And then we see a very interesting topic, which is to talk about this type of bullying carried out through this type of technologies. It's a paradox because we use it to satisfy our needs of search, interaction. We also have had the possibility of acting regarding a phenomena that makes it very harmful. So it can happen in social medias, chats, games, cell phones, a repetitive behavior with the purpose of massacrating, annoying, making the other person ashamed, or other things the person that provokes and the other one that suffers. I went to literature and decided to bring some interesting topics. There's this work. I put the translation of it, but the original article is not in Portuguese. So there is a relationship between suicidal ideation, experiences with the cyberbullying, bullying, and insults. This study was held with over 500 high school students. The teenagers that were the aggressor or the victim of bullying had more ideas of ideation of suicide. I know some other parts and articles will talk much more about victimization, the victim, but it's interesting to check the profile of the person that is the aggressor and the person that suffers. There's a relationship between suicidal ideation and the person that is the victim or the aggressor of bullying. The victimization is much more related to behaviors and thoughts of suicide than the offenders. That's when we will see who are the profiles that will have more thoughts of suiciding. If you put something in a social network, that attitude the person is trying is an aggressive, violent attitude. And aggression among teenagers should be taken seriously. At school, at college, as Professor Rosanna said about this ideation, which is related to the profile where you can act with the aggressors and the victims, and suggest that component of prevention and intervention uh, to prevent a suicidal ideation are what we can see here on the slide. So bullying, cyberbullying, virtual bullying, electronic bullying is a type of violence among so many other violences. And there's an example where we have several violences multiplied within one action committed by one or more individuals against others that can't easily defend themselves. Some texts will mention that the victim is as a person that is stuck or that is there's also dissemination of humors, sending of aggressive messages, visual, verbal violence, and today there has been a growth regarding the use of artificial intelligence. And with that, so many other things have been put through the digital means. So account falsification, assault, and other type of aggressions through digital means. It's terrible. If we make a survey, we will see that a high percent of our group have dealt with people that suffered cyberbullying. Who has? Raise your hands. Yeah, people suffer a lot, right? Violence is so high, and despite we talk about what's happening, it's as if we all start to comment on that, of something that takes a while to be explicit because the person suffers silently until the family or the other adults take quite a while to notice what's happening. And John Glenn's work, they did a meta-analysis where they say there's a relationship which is highly relevant between victimization by bullying, self-mutilation, suicidal ideation, and attempt to commit suicide. Probably of all patients that you have had, when suffered alone in silence, tried or thought about suicide. And making an association of this entire history of violence. Also, in a recent work of Deceiver, social media is changing a lot. Increasingly, we use it more. I'm at the time where we had phones at home, landlines in your living room, and everyone used the same phone. But today, everyone has their own laptop, cell phone. The use of social media has increased a lot. So it is changing rapidly the styles of communication in the world. The emergence of this media is increasingly influencing youth, and we noticed there was a greater growth after the pandemic because basically all of us had to use it a bit more than we did before. And so the schools that have using and has been using it to teach how to read and write and maths are also using electronic devices. So as day goes by, people are coming into contact earlier in life with social medias, and it's used to it is an interaction between groups and individuals that share ideas and share things. And same thing as virtual communities. Although it seems complicated, my view is kind of romanticized. Well, we cannot romanticize the situation. When we think of reproducing, sharing, exchanging ideas, but cyberbullying is completely different from this motivation that is completely different from wanting to share ideas and things in social network. It has become a platform where the students that connect, and so initially with teachers, classmates, colleagues that share ideas or other authorities in the life of the student, and people are increasingly using it to access social networks, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, WhatsApp, and the access has been become people are accessing it from an earlier age now. Social network is transforming the behavior of the youth. Every young people uses it today. Teenagers, children. How many hours have teenagers been using of social network? Basically, we have noticed that it's much more than interaction with their own family, much more. That concerns me. The role of family, the role of social media, the role of interaction of people that sometimes withdraw from contact with their family members. Sometimes the family doesn't notice a phenomenon happening in this interaction because people start isolating themselves and it becomes a symptomatic thing, actually. In Schwarz's work, also from this year, published this year, he says, despite this initiative of prevention against cyberbullying, it's not that recent, although we have been talking about it in the past 10 years more. There are several prevention strategies, but it still exists. So we have noticed that incidents of suicide in this population have increased, and you probably got scared. It's the fourth or the second, doesn't matter the ranking, it's still dangerous, it's harmful, we get concerned with what happens. The study had as goal to define social predictors and suicidal ideation with 7,000 students from the 9th grade to the 2nd grade of high school. I was concerned when I read this article because basically 20% reported suicidal ideation. 20% is a lot. And among these 20%, 10% actually tried to commit suicide this past year. Of the participants with depression, 46% had suicidal ideations. 20% tried to commit suicide. Among women, 27% thought about it. 13 attempts of suicide. People that are overweight or underweight also suffer a lot of bullying, and it has been a predominant factor. People that are obese, and we have reports of children with morbidity, they suffer a lot. They suffer a lot. I'm talking here about overweight, but there's also bullying of calling that person that is too skinny or too slim. It's also because she's also out of the normal standard, let's put it that way. And to that, predictors forced sexual relations, sexual violence, use of drugs, difficulty in cognitive processing, attention, perception, memory, reasoning, difficulty to learn, early use of alcohol, marijuana. All these are important predictors to talk about suicidal ideation and attempt to commit suicide. Their conclusion is that we have to urgently interfere and have a support system to the teenagers, family, and all those that suffer cyberbullying. It's not for 10 years, it's for now. And possibly we have to leave this place thinking about what we can do to help that community, that person, that group, that population that is suffering. Also, another fact is to foresee that for those that are suffering, girls and boys, they will try suicide and try to foresee some type of scenario in this sense. Important components. People are much more than their opinion. It was what I call violence not so long ago. To have a violent behavior in social network is conflicting to the fact that it's very different from issuing an opinion. What has been what is posted many times used in a very degrading way, like spreading lies. People say, oh, it's a joke. It's not a joke to talk about someone because they're overweight or underweight or because they have some type of behavior. It's not joke. The word joke does not fit into this. Some aggressors and victims, oh no, it was just a joke. No, it's not a joke when the other person is offended, excluding, canceling. So I have the aggressor, the person that provokes, the victim that is suffers the action of the aggressor. I have the person that is the target, but sometimes practices it. Sometimes it happens between victim and aggressor, and we also have to pay attention to people that reinforce that behavior. That is what I call them witness. They encourage bullying. They encourage the aggressor, criticizing or being indifferent. We need to know how to deal with these situations. Cyberbullying, suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts is very worrying. And it's very interesting, as we have noticed, the role of these social medias that are making people suffer in their family and individually. Imagine certain populations, social minorities, how much they suffer. Within a period of the story of the development of this girl or boy, where basically the building of their gender identity has some moments where they have questions. For this minority, it's very hard for them, and they face hardships within the scope of mental health. They have anxiety, depression, substance use, suicidal thoughts. The person doesn't feel that they were welcomed, taken care of within their gender construction identity. In this sense, I would like us to use our education to train professionals, because everyone has skills in them to know how to deal with the suffering that the other brings to you. I think there's still several possibilities to talk about the training of others, the family, the teenager, school, understand the minority and how they relate to teenagers, train therapists, educators, fathers, mothers, so that they can cope with these questions, these matters, discussions. Family, oftentimes the family doesn't talk about sex, gender. It talks about everything, but not sex nor gender, as if it were a secret. And cyber haters, the person that provokes and that has put on the internet, no one is seeing, so I can offend the other. Intolerance in social networks, many times encouraged. People may have speeches, discourses, calling it a joke when in reality it's not. That's a growing phenomena. We'll see a negative impact in the lives of people. Some works have analyzed what makes people do that. What are their thoughts, beliefs, feelings, rules? And the study says, I can use it because it's free. I can give my opinion. I have a space where no one will find me, and then we can we should dialogue about empathy, ideology of equality and social justice. What is my duty? What is my right? The right of the other, the right of everyone of existing, the right to exist of everyone. The offline world, online world, the online world. Now with AI, it has become even broader. Of course, when used in an appropriate and convenient way, it has generated really nice, great people, but it's not what we notice. Because there are exceptions. So possibilities have multiplied, especially after pandemic with the use of the internet, where everyone used social network for everything, leisure, work, social interactions, and we still do that. That is adequate. What is not adequate is to practice cyberbullying. Negative points used to harm the other. That's bad. And it has generated infinite possibilities when we notice the possibility of what social media can offer to everyone. In research carried out in the state of Ceará with 13-year-old students, they applied a questionnaire regarding about suicidal ideation and related to how they relate to satisfaction with life, scales of anxiety and depression. And it noticed the greater the rate of anxiety and depression, the smaller the satisfaction with life. That's something we have to always ask. So we can use AI today, as I mentioned. You see screens of people committing act scenes that the person did not do that. So manipulations exist now. Evaluating the effect of social violence suffered in a childhood, they carried out a search with 1,600 people from 18 years of age to 60. Most of them are white heterosexual women, and basically 60% have been victims of a sexual violence. Then they did this inventory of suicidal thinking. They saw that victims of sexual violence had suicidal ideation rates higher than the ones that were not victims of sexual violence. So we also have to notice, pay attention to what's happening. In a correlation test, they show that sexual violence is positively related to suicidal ideation. How many people that you served, most of which women, that were assaulted sexually, it was, and then they were exposed in social network regarding this, and they tried suicide. Intrafamilial violence in a study with students of public school. 31% is a lot. 39% suicidal ideation, 18% an attempt to commit suicide the prior year. Then here I have something that reaches the school related to family aggressions. What has been done? Well, some laws have been used, so we need more things than what is on the slide. We have the law 14.811 that has transformed the crime of bullying and cyberbullying. And we also using social network for people to self-mutilate. Now we have the 2015 law instituting the program to fight against systematic intimidation. I think we still have to talk about this because it still exists. How many screams and yells can be fit in the silence of the person that is suffering silently? How many? How many yells, how many screams fit in silence? What can we do? I'm not going to repeat what has been said already, but we have to think. We have to reflect. We have to dialogue. We notice in this silence a distancing between the person and their family. Sometimes the family notices that the kid doesn't want to do anything, don't want to go to school, doesn't want, and the family will only think about it too much, much after when something happens. You have to make it very clear for the kid that they can report what's happening to them. The teenager can report what's happening to them. The schools should offer a place for discussion. The notion of guilt. Uh, she will feel guilt. She was analyzed, she was judged. Having campaigns at school stimulates socialization and especially relationships of respect. Students oftentimes they do not ask for help. Family, adolescents, people live in the same space, but they don't know themselves very well. Motives like shame, fear, and adults need to pay attention to the behaviors of their children. AI platform that has encouraged a case of suicide. I think that's very worrying. Change has to happen now. It happened this month. On November 25, we will have an event to talk about this relationship between suicidal ideation, the use of internet, and the attempt to commit suicide. I've been using, I've been looking at more deeply into the very interesting answers to teenagers. This is an easy chat. It's easy to interact with. The app is good and the results have been great. Thank you, Carlos. Hosanna, Carlos, Gilson, please come close to us. We're going to end now, but first, I want to do something that I left to the end, which is thank you. Thank you. And on behalf of the memory of Father Haroldo, he would say, with an accent, he would say in Portuguese, my dear, my friend, pastor, say what God speaks to your heart, that everything is right. So that's what we're going to do now, right? Everything, stand up, everyone, stand up. Stand up, everyone. Stand up, everyone. So what I say and what I do, you have to repeat with me, okay? Yeah? Okay. So the love of God is big. The love of God is big. Are you not able to do it? Again, the love of God is big. Keep your arms up. Really big. Really big. The love of God, God's love surrounds me to the right, to the left, okay? To the left. To the left. To the left. God's love surrounds me to the right, to the right. God's love surrounds me behind. God's love surrounds me in front of me. In front of me. You stretched, right? God's love surrounds me all over. All over. You can can be happy if we love God, if we love the other, and if we love ourselves. Each one of my colleagues here, panelists, will win a gift. Any others? Who is the person who is among us that have an amount of experiences that is greater than everyone else's, above 80? No? None? 79, 78, 77? Wait, 78? Okay, come here then. You're going to take a picture now. Raise your hands, and they will take a picture now, facing the panel and backing the audience. You will be in the picture. Everyone for Freemind 2025. Careful. Raise your hands. Raise your hands. Look how beautiful. Congratulations. Wait. Now, the youngest of us all, 20, 21, 23, 20. Come here. You want it. I know, Marcelo. Wait. We will listen to you outside of the auditorium. I want to suggest some books, one of which is You Want It. You Want It. 21. Daily Words for Difficult Relationships. Paths for Restoration. My wife wrote this book. Grace for Anxious People. And the new launch, amazing, addictive emotional cycles. It has just been launched. I'm not going to give any spoilers. Okay, go to the bookstore. But wait, we haven't finished yet. Now we're going to talk about spirituality and science, the importance of spirituality in the treatment of patients, in the recovery of individual success cases, professionals, public administrators, and actions that are happening. You participate with us right now of today's last panel, spirituality and science. Let's wait a few moments so that YouTube's link is open, and then we will